Good morning. Today I'm going to be setting up a full end-to-end installation of a project I've been working on for quite a while here at the Reynolds Journalism Institute at the University of Missouri. I've been graced by their ability to offer me a fellowship this year. And so with that, I continued to work on this project. It lets you or your small or medium-sized newsroom get a mobile app for little to nothing compared to what it would normally cost. So instead of $30,000, we're going to talk about maybe 50 to 60 bucks a month, and you get a full mobile app. It's completely open source. And I guess we'll just get into it. There's a couple different parts to this project. The first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to actually go in and install a plugin for the CMS. The way that push works is that the CMS is attached. Your CMS is your CMS. This does not replace that. It simply sort of attaches itself to it, takes advantage of everything you're doing, and then any changes you make in your content management system, whether it's WordPress or blocks by Town News, etc., is automatically reflected in the app. This is unlike a lot of other solutions out there where you have to have a dedicated person in your team managing all this and handling the day-to-day. This just sort of happens. It sort of works. I've had people straight up forget that they sort of had an app, and it just sort of keeps chugging along merrily. So today we're going to do WordPress because it's pretty common. It's also fairly visual. So let's get started. Now, the first thing that we're going to have to do is log into our backend. So let me just make sure here that everything is nice and nifty and starting from scratch as much as possible. And so let's go with WordPress demo.pushapp.press. Oh, that's my bad. So this is a sample WordPress site that I set up myself. Literally has nothing in it. This is just for demo purposes. You would be using your own. Okay. The password. And here we go. It's a standard WordPress backend. We're just going to put in a plugin. Okay, so this is where you normally would do it. Here you go. Click Add New, and you're going to upload it. It's not in the store. However, we need to actually download it first. And all of this stuff is actually available at this GitHub. For those of you that don't know what GitHub is, if you're an editor or something like that, that's totally fine. If you have a tech person, I hope that they're familiar with it. If they're not, well, that's something that they should really be learning. There's a lot of good, great tutorials. But what this basically is an entire repository of all the different parts of the project. It's totally open to anybody. And in here, we're going to click on WordPress. So, because if you look here, WordPress expects you to have a zip format to be able to upload it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to download the zip from GitHub. And unfortunately, it has on Macs a bit of a problem where it automatically unzips the file. So we don't want that. So we need to re-archive it. And this is where you get your WordPress plugin. Push WordPress Master. So we'll upload that to the WordPress. Install it. Okay, so now what this plugin does for WordPress is that it goes through and will automatically manage all the categories that you have for your project that you've set up for the front end, everything that you've also set up on articles, the way that photos are viewed, etc. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can go here. Once it's activated, which I believe it is, we can reload, go to settings, push mobile app, and here's everything that you got. This lets you basically choose to sort your stories by either categories or post types, depending on what you set up. And then you can also check the box to exclude one. So say you have something that's only available to very specific logged in users on your website. You don't want to go into the full app. You can click here, save, and it will automatically not put that in any results that are sent out to the mobile app. So you can keep control of your content from within your own build. It's pretty nice. I ran into that problem with a former client, so I built it in. What we can do now is we can test to make sure that this works. So everything I just talked about is right here, by the way. So if we just try to attach to the URL, and of course, what did I screw up? There we go. There's the API that it automatically added to the back end of your WordPress. So this is only one article, but for our purposes, it will do just fine. Okay. So now that we got that set up, this is the last thing that you need to do on your own site. That's all that it takes. And it's ready to start handling it. Okay, so now there's a second part. The second part is what we call the back end. The back end is an entire app that runs on a server somewhere, just like your CMS sort of does, and it's sort of the CMS for the app itself. So instead of managing, instead of the app having to know whether you're on WordPress or you're on a different type of CMS and formatting all the articles itself, this backend is what actually handles that. It makes it a lot easier to add new features. It makes it a lot easier to send push notifications. It takes care of everything that you would expect normally the app to do, but the app instead gets to be a little bit dumber, a little bit easier, a little bit faster. So we need to set that up. Now, this, if you've ever heard of it, is called a Ruby on Rails app. If you're watching this for setup purposes, I'm guessing you probably know what that is. And basically, this is set up so that it can run on any sort of server, whether you have a big box in the back room of your newsroom still, or you're on something like Amazon's AWS or Google's Cloud or Microsoft's Azure. This lets you install everything onto itself very quickly and very easily. And in fact, this is set up to use a system called Docker, which makes your life as a system administrator, if you're the one running it, even easier, because it means you don't need to handle most of the installation stuff. Everything just sort of happens for you. And again, this is all really well described here in Push in the documentation for the repository. I wish I could be a little bit more exciting about this, guys, but it's just a lot of code, and we're just sort of going into it. Okay, so this is actually going to take a little bit of time here. So if I sort of go silent because a bunch of code is compiling, my apologies. There's only so much that you can talk about with all this. But let's start the setup. So like it says here, basically this is going to assume that you're setting something up on a Linux system. I usually use Ubuntu. It's nice and easy. It's available for free on Amazon AWS's. You don't need to pay a licensing fee for it. You have to have permissions so that you can actually get to an administration. And you need to be comfortable within what we call a terminal, which you'll be seeing in just a minute. Let me make that a little bit bigger here for you. Now, the cool thing about all this is that it actually runs really, really well on even the free tier that Amazon puts out. So there's different sizes of computers that you can set up, and the free tier, the micro, is something that you can actually run this completely on no problem for testing and demonstration purposes. Then you can always upgrade to something that maybe costs $20 a month or so. A small system will handle 10,000 users, no problem at all. But we're going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to set up an Amazon instance. So let's go to aws.amazon.com. And I'm going to log in with the account that, again, still getting used to cameras. That one, those guys have so graciously provided for myself over the last year. If you ever get a chance to apply for the RJI Fellowship and you're interested, you absolutely should. They didn't actually tell me to even say that. I just really enjoy what they do. Great research, great new batch of fellows coming in this year. Definitely pay attention to what they're putting out there and what you're seeing in the world. So right now I'm just on my other computer grabbing the password that I don't want to show all of you guys. So I can just type it in. No. Yeah, we'll save it for this. Gonna wipe this machine afterwards anyways. Okay, so welcome to the AWS console. The only thing that we're going to get into for this project is the EC2, which is just where you keep all your servers, where you manage everything, where everything sort of runs. And what you'll notice here are two things. The first thing you'll notice is this is that WordPress installation that we have up and running as for the demo purposes, running on a micro. And just yesterday, or not yesterday, sorry, last week, we launched the Columbia, Missourian app. Somebody here? We launched the Columbia, Missourian app, which is running right here on, as I mentioned, a nice little small instance. And it just keeps humming away in the background. You can download it from the Google App Store and the iTunes App Store as well. I highly recommend it. It's a great app, and you get to support a bunch of local journalists. So now we're going to launch an instance. I'm going to choose Ubuntu. This is 16, but it's been tested all the way up through 17. So for the purposes of today and expediency, I'm going to launch something extremely big. I do not recommend that you do this. It costs a lot of money. Like you accidentally leave it on overnight, for instance, and it might ding you $60. But because of how long it takes at one specific step, this will just make my life being on camera for the next 2 to 3, 4 hours or something like that a little bit easier, a little bit faster. Normally this is something that Netflix would spin up or something like that, but we'll just do this for the moment. So we'll choose that one. Normally, I would recommend choosing this one. For the first time you ever install it, choose a T2 Micro. It's free. You don't need to worry about anything. It has a gig of memory, which is more than enough to start out with. And this whole process will take a little bit longer, but it will also save you a lot of money in the long run. Okay. So all the defaults are pretty good. The only thing that we need to do here is we need to edit the security groups. So the reason we need to do this is because on an Amazon server, by default, it only lets you SSH in. It's the only thing that only type of data that they let onto the server by default is SSH, so you can actually get in and do stuff with it, which is great for security purposes. What it's not great for is if you actually need to be able to serve web content, for instance. So we need to add some rules for that. Depending on your host, you may or may not need to do this. Some hosts do this automatically, but we'll add two. We'll add port 80 and 443. Port 80 is going to come up in a little bit, and it's just to make sure that you can actually do the initial setup. After you're done, you can get rid of that and just keep 443 for those of you that are really into SSL, which is my favorite. We're going to review and launch. That's all fine. Hit launch. And we are going to create a key pair. This lets us actually SSH in or connect to the server itself. So we're just going to call this push demo. I'm going to call it 2 because I was doing some run-throughs and there's already a 1. I'll download it. Okay. So you guys are all seeing this. Don't worry, I'm never going to reuse this key again. So don't think you're going to do something, massively nefarious or something. The server and the key will disappear later. But for future references, keep this key safe. This is a key that you should not share with anybody. You should keep a backup and nothing else, because this gives full access to the back end of your machine, which is something that you need to be really careful about when you're actually making this for real. You don't want somebody to be able to connect to it, because they'll be able to wipe it out, they'll be able to replace your code with anything else, etc., etc. So what we need to do now is we need to actually make a copy of that key and put it into the right place for SSH. Now, if you have a brand new machine, you're going to actually have to do something like this. Let me make that bigger for everybody. You're going to have to make the directory, which I usually put there. Already exists though. So we'll just do this. Downloads, push, and then we're going to put it into that directory. Push demo2.pem. Okay, you need to make sure that it renames itself as .pem and not that text, because otherwise it's not going to work out very well. And again, if you got any questions, you can either add it to the Facebook live feed, which I have been turning off because watching myself in 10-second delay is getting confusing, or you can, let's just watch this, there we go. Or you can also tweet at me, which is @cguess, or you see the hashtag right down there. Also, we'll be monitoring that. Let's see if there's any, no, nothing, cool. Okay, let me just make sure I got the right hashtag up here. Hey, some people, okay, no, mostly just us. Okay, cool. Okay, next step, now that we have that, is we need to actually connect to this instance that we are launching right here. Okay. So you can go in and see that this is booting up. We'll give it a second. Let's add a tag to this so that we actually can know what's going on. And then the next step is, so the next step now is Amazon automatically gives your instance a public ID. Now the problem is that this can change. Amazon makes no guarantees that this will stay the same over the long run, and that's generally not a great thing if you want to actually make sure that your server can talk to itself. So what instead we do is we create what they also call an elastic IP. This is a permanent IP address that they will always, okay, I'm going to get rid of that real quick, that will always stay the same and will always be attached to this instance. So no matter what the instance does, this will always stay attached to it. And so we're going to do that real quick. We're going to allocate a new address. Great, we got one. It's this, 182.07.51.195. So now we have to associate it with what we just created, that push out. And we hit associate, which is phenomenal. Okay. And so now can go back in here and we'll see that the new IP address that we just created is permanently linked to that, which is very useful. Okay, so there's one step that I'm going to do off screen because it's not really, it's going to depend wildly on what your organization does. But essentially what we need to do is we need to take this IP address, we need to associate it with the domain name. So if you use GoDaddy, there's certain ways to do this. I use a project called Namecheap to buy all my URLs. Works out pretty well. But for the moment, I am going to keep a little bit of this obfuscated and in the back end. And and just do a little bit of hand wavy magic here. But just give me a second while I associate that. So what a DNS does is it takes the web address, so google.com or what have you, and then associates it with the IP address that you actually want. This lets you change around what server it points to, lets you make modifications, etc., without making people remember new names every time. And that's really important, for modern life, but also makes it a lot easier for me when I'm setting these things up. So I'm going to do push demo, and it's going to be 18.207.51.195. Okay, now that's done. So now we're going to hold off. We're not going to test that yet. It takes a little bit of time for that to actually go out to the network and propagate across the entire world. So while we're doing that, what we can do is instead just connect straight to the box. So we do SSH, then Ubuntu, which is the standard user that Amazon creates when you're running one of their boxes. And then we attach the PEM key that we just created right there. So .i means we're not going to be using a password. Instead, we're going to be using this identification PEM key, which is a really, really, really long password, more or less. Depending on who your host is, you might do this, you might have a password. But once we get in, that's all that matters. Okay, yes, we'll agree. Oops. From my... Oh, I forgot to do one thing. With the security key, you also need to set the permissions to be proper. This is basically on a Linux or a Mac machine like this, there's a couple different permissions that you can give any file, whether it's read, write, or access. And essentially, you want to really lock it down so that no one else except the main machine itself can actually read it. It's mildly archaic, but still very important. So we just do this line, sudo chmod 400, type in the password for the machine. Okay, and now we should be able to get in, no problem. There we are. Okay, we are into the box that we just booted up. This is where we're going to live for the next 10 to 20 minutes. Maybe a little longer. Okay, so now we can go back to the documentation that I've written. And this will, if we follow this to the letter, everything should work perfectly. I hope. We always hope. So I'm just going to be copy and pasting all the commands over here. Sudo apt-get update. This just makes sure that all the software on the machine is as up-to-date as it can be so that we're using everything with the newest security changes, etc. Fairly quick. And now we need to install Docker. Docker is essentially a system that lets you program your server instances. So it needs to run on a computer, but then it takes over and it handles all the software setup. It emulates some hardware, more or less. And it just makes it a lot easier so that every time you boot something, it always comes up the same way. So we're just going to follow these instructions to install everything. We just did that actually for our own command. So now we can do this. Yes, we want to agree to install these things. This line just adds a security key so it can confirm that all the software that we're installing is actually what we said it is. We can look, and it's the same across the board. So nobody's getting in between and doing something malicious, which is very important. Now we make sure that it can see the code that Docker likes. We run update again, since we just added another repository. We need to make sure we pull everything from there. And now we install Docker. Yes, want to continue. So that's all done and good. We can test it. This is just a really basic little container that it boots up just to make sure that everything actually functions and works and all that jazz, and it looks like it did. So the next step that we need to do is install something called Docker Compose. Docker Compose makes it really easy to set up multiple parts of Docker very quickly and easily. So you can bring up a database, you can bring up a server, you can bring up logging all at once. And it's really fast, it's really easy. We just got to make sure that we're using the Linux tab on the screen. And we can just copy and paste a couple more commands over. Want to make sure that it's actually runnable, again with the chmod. And then I like to add this command completion. If you're on Linux, all you need to do is copy and paste this one command, and you're good to go. You could also technically set this all up on a Mac, but I would not recommend it. It will get a little confusing. Okay, a couple more commands. I know this is sort of just some rote stuff, but this makes sure that your user gets access to all the Docker stuff. And now that we've installed everything, we need to restart or exit our terminal by typing exit, logging back in, and this resets everything so that we have all the new commands, all the new software, everything is at our fingertips finally. Okay, so we can try to install Git. Already in there, which is awesome. Git is what helps us maintain the repository. So now we do clone. This is what we're going to do here is pull down all of the content for the backend. This is actually putting the code onto the server from the repository. It's a big one. It's a big one, but it goes pretty quickly. Okay, so now that we're in here, we start following the instructions again. We go into the code, and now we start the actual setup process. I've written a bunch of scripts that let you go through the process one by one. And it'll just ask you some basic questions. So these are all the types of CMSs that it currently supports. The big one are number 1 and number 5 for most people. Number 3 might come up, but I really feel sorry for you if you do have to deal with Joomla. Our support for it is functional, but not great. However, for WordPress and for Town News blocks, it's very robust. So we'll do 1. Want a name of the news organization that we're actually creating. Okay, so now we need to point it to the WordPress installation that we have, or whatever you're using. Oh. Copying and pasting from Safari automatically adds HTTP. Cool. Okay, so now it needs to know what the host name for this installation is. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I went off screen. So what I created is pushdemo.codingwithchris.com. Yep, I own the domain. Got very lucky one night, but this is where it's going to live. And it's going to ask you a couple of questions about your setup. And if you answer yes, it's going to ask you a couple more questions. And so if you're running WordPress and you're using Google Search as like sort of your backend for your search functionality, then you'd want to click yes. Today we're not going to. We're going to keep it super simple. There is also something called the WordPress Super Cache plugin, which honestly looks great. Something I'm not 100% familiar with, but I also have instructions in the website, in the appendix, to be able to set that up correctly. Okay, so now that we answered no to those two things, we can choose languages. There's a bunch of languages that this system supports. You'll notice that a significant portion of them are Eastern European, and the main reason for that is this project actually started in Eastern Europe when I was working with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project as a Knight International Journalism Fellow. And so the very first partners that I actually had in this were in Azerbaijani and in Serbian and in Russian and such things. So the app is available in many, many languages, 7 apparently, but right now we're just going to choose 1 for today. So we'll type 3, and then we're done choosing languages, so we hit 7. And what this does is it creates an environments variable, and you can actually see that. Right here. This basically just sets up the introduction and baseline for the entire project. This is all that actually the server reads. This is the only thing that you have to change. Anything that you change in here is what actually gets what actually affects the functionality of the backend itself. You don't have to do any real coding yourself. Everything here, if you're not a coder, might look like it's computer programming, but it's not. This is just all very basic configuration files. We're just running other software. So this is all you have to do. So now that we have this up and running, let's go back to the setup instructions. And now we run another script. This script adds the S to HTTPS on your browser. This is called SSL. And what SSL is it basically means that everything that's being sent to your computer from the server and vice versa is going to be encrypted, which is going to be really, really functional. Let's see here. Nope. Okay, cool. And required nowadays. Basically, if you don't have this, Chrome will actually scream at you very loudly. Apple won't let you put it into the app. There's a bunch of reasons that you want to do this, not the least just because it's the right thing to do. But it's normally very complicated to set this up. I decided to make it easy, or at least as easy as I could. So we're going to run another script here. It's going to answer a couple more questions. It might even ask the same question. Yep. So it's push demo.codingwithchris.com. And it set up another one. Okay, cool. So now we're going to do something that's going to take probably half an hour. So if I walk away, my apologies, folks. This is generating what's called a DH param key. And it is a very, very, very long prime number that the computer has to chug through. This is why I chose a very large server to run the demo on instead of, say, a micro or a small like you would do when you're actually setting this up. You're going to want to run this command and then go home for the night if you're on a micro or a small. It'll be ready in the morning, probably, hopefully. But it's going to take a long time. It has to try out a lot of different combinations of different numbers to find one that it can actually use to secure your connection with. So this command just brings up a copy of the Nginx web server, telling it not to boot at the end, and basically just, yeah, that's what it does. And so Nginx will boot, it'll create a DH param, and then it will go away. Right now, what it's doing is it's building all these different servers. So it's downloading all the code, basically doing what we just did, but it's doing it automatically. Looks very magical and everything, and to be honest, sort of is. I love it. It's totally changed the way I run everything. Okay, so this is going to be taking a long time. As you can see, as it says here, they even warn you straight up that it's going to take a long time. And there's nothing, unfortunately, what the heck just happened? Welcome to a live demo, everybody. This is where things get interesting. So you're going to watch me debug this for half a second. That doesn't make sense at all. It should have taken like 45 minutes. So we're just going to delete the file that it generated, probably with a bug or something like that, and we'll just try it again. It's really easy to do that. You just do a sudo rm, and then it's in the Docker file. It's in nginx. It's called... Actually, let's just make sure I get it right. ls. There it is. This is the file right here that we want to delete. That was probably errantly created. So we can just do sudo rm.docker/nginx/dhparam.pem. Okay, now if we rerun that command, yep, it's gone. So we'll try it one more time here. Of course, always when it's live. I did this 4 times yesterday and it never had a problem, but there we go. Okay, this seems to be going a little bit smoother. Okay, so now we got another 45 minutes. So let's see what's going on Facebook, if anybody's talking about there. A couple questions here. So Brad Gentry is asking if there's documentation for town news blocks. There isn't yet. I'm almost there. I literally just launched the first one last week, so I'm going to be putting that in to it as soon as I possibly can. It works really well. You just need to create a couple of user permissions on the back end. And so I want to get access to the back end of a town news installation to be able to take some screenshots for everybody so that it's really self-explanatory. And thank you, Josie. Yeah, feel free to watch through it all later. Try it out. Try to follow along yourself sometime. It's, as you can see, everything is just mostly copy and paste. If you do what I did, you'll be able to set one up pretty easily, I think. Just pause the videos a lot. We're going to cut them down into different sections so that everything is goes very smoothly and easily. So you can just like pull out the backend section. You can pull out just the WordPress section. You can pull out just the how to build an iOS app, how to build an Android app, or you can follow it straight through from beginning to end, which I prefer to do, but that's just me. Let's see what else is going on. Okay, yeah, so the reason that I actually started this project, I'll just talk over the code generation. The reason I started this project is that essentially I was working out in Eastern Europe with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. We were working on sort of sustainable models for small journalists in that region, and our original hypothesis turned out to be horribly wrong. Turns out advertising doesn't work in Eastern Europe, especially if you're an investigative reporting center going against the government. And so we started to look at some other models. And one of my colleagues mentioned that they really wanted an app for their site. And so I thought that would be a good idea. I assumed that, something like WordPress, where you could just download some code, set it up in a couple hours and have it fully function, something that the open source community tends to like to build, would exist. So I went around and I looked around and no, there isn't. So I decided to build it. It took quite a long time, but that's what came out of this project. That's where this project came from in the beginning. So I first launched it in those in a couple organizations in Eastern Europe. I was over there for 2 years, and have since then just been building on it. Last about a year, a little over a year ago, I got the news that RJI would be accepting me as a fellow and bringing me here to Missouri to give me even more time and support and wherewithal to actually continue to work on this in a full-time manner, which was extremely useful, and let me just really refine a lot of stuff. It may not look too refined, but compared to what it used to be, it's a lot better. And most of this is done automatically, so it's been really great to be able to work on this. And I might just go silent here for a few minutes, guys. Let me put something up. Because continuing to talk over and over and over might drive me a little bit insane. And we got a file set up. Here we go. So thanks everyone for sitting through that little piece, if you did. If not, well, we're about halfway through setting up the back end. We're actually much further along than halfway through. Halfway through on the setup, or on the steps, but actually time-wise, a lot longer. Okay. So now that we got that set up, the next thing that we're going to do is go on to step 8. And we're going to have it set up all the development databases. Again, this is totally scripted out. Very easy. Just builds up everything and runs it automatically for you. So what this is doing is it's creating all the databases, and filling them with the structure that the entire system sort of requires. Right now it's downloading Ruby. That's the language that the entire backend is written in. It's installing all of its keys just like we did before. Now it's going to be installing all of the pieces and portions and parts. Or as in Ruby, they're called gems. Other places they're called like libraries or something like that. But basically it's just taking everything and putting it in the right place for us. So you don't have to do it manually because that is a mess. Thank God for package managers. That's all I gotta say. Okay, there we go. It's starting it up. It's putting everything in the places that it needs to go. And, okay, that part is done. Okay, so now we're going to actually generate the keys. Before that, what we generated before was actually just, it was a very long number that can be used to increase security. Now we're going to generate the keys. This happens very quickly. But there's a couple steps. I tried my darndest for a long time to make it easier, but this is the best I got right now. If you follow me closely, it should work out just fine. I'll step you through the whole thing. So the first thing we do is we run the let's encrypt Docker compose, but we only run one little portion of it. If you just copy and paste this over full text, it should just work. So it's going to build some more containers up. I sort of sound like somebody explaining like bad software in the 90s, but you're just going to have to go with it for the moment. Promise you this is actually much more advanced than they had in the 90s, even if it still looks like the same. Okay. So now what we do is we actually, and this doesn't make a lot of sense if you actually know what Docker is and all this, but just going to run with it here. So we run it up, start everything up. Going to get a bunch of errors, especially from Nginx here. It's going to be continuously shutting down and stopping and erroring out, and that's fine for right now. So now what you do is you press the Control key and hit C, which will shut the whole thing down. We run that previous command again. Which this time now says congratulations. Again, I have no idea why it works this way, but this works. For some reason it fails the first time. If you start it up, I think it's putting folders in the right place, but I haven't had the time to figure it out completely. But if you follow this, it'll work. So now we have congratulations. It's been put into this folder. Well, that's annoying because we don't want this at the end of it. So we need to move them. Now that's not that hard to do. Again, we have steps right here. You're going to have to edit some things, but basically we do is we can take this. Now we'll go in and we're going to replace the part. I copied too much, but we'll just delete that in a minute. But we're going to delete this. We're going to replace it with push demo.codingwithchris.com. We basically just want to remove that 00001, and so we're going to move the file over. Let's delete the rest of this. There we go. Push demo.codingwithchris.com. So we're just going to delete that 0001. We're going to move all the files over. And now we can delete the main one as well. So I'm going to go sudo rm.docker data secrets keys live. There we go. Oh, forgot a flag. Sudo rm-arts. Okay, and now if we go ahead and just look at that folder where the keys are kept, see we only have one folder. And if we look inside of that, we have all of the keys that we need for SSL. Normally, that actually, though as slightly complicated as it was, is actually really easy to set up SSL keys. And took myself and a couple of my colleagues over at OCCRP quite a little bit of time to actually figure out. However, now we can start up our server. Actually, let's kill it first. Forgot to restart it. Okay, so what we're going to want to do, this will do nothing now. You'll want to run this first, make sure everything's gone. Now we can run sudo docker compose up. And we should see everything coming up just fine. And there we are. And now we can go to push demo.codingwithchris.com. And there's our site up and running with HTTPS. If we go to admin, you'll be able. We haven't added any users yet, but we'll get to that in just a minute here. But so this is the backend. This is what you're seeing. It's great. Okay, so we can close out of that. You can go back here, and now what we can do is we can run docker compose up dash sudo docker compose up dash D. This puts into the background, leaves the foreground running without it running in the foreground. And because the Docker Compose, if it ever has a bug or errors out, it will automatically restart. Oh, we need to bring it down. And we'll bring it up. It'll put everything into the background. And if we go back here, we'll still see Everything's here. Okay, so now the last thing that we're going to do with this is we're going to add an initial user. Super simple. This way that this is so it doesn't accidentally come up with the default user that you forget to delete or something like that. So we'll just do it real quick like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to run docker compose, and we're going to run web. We're going to run Rails C. This will bring up a Rails console, which will allow us to interact with the database outside of just the web interface. Okay, so now we're in the console. So now what we do is we make a new user. User.new. Okay, so user, we'll set the email. I'll set it to myself. We'll set the password. Now everybody that knows the URL will be able to log in on the password, but you'll only get it for like 45 minutes. I'm deleting it after the project's done, or like a couple hours. Deleting after the project's done. Let's do this one. User.save. Okay, and now we can go in here and we can log in. Okay, welcome to the back end, everybody. Once you're back here, you have your notifications, you have analytics, you have user management, you have your own user management, and you can sign out as well.